I checked my bank account this morning and had $3,000 just sitting there. And my first thought wasn't, oh, good, I have money. My first thought was, wait, where the fuck did the rest of it go? I make $120,000 a year. That's more money than my mom made in her entire career, more than most of my friends make. That's objectively a really good salary. And yet every single month I'm sitting here doing mental math, trying to figure out how I'm supposed to afford dinner at that new Italian place in Fort Greene without feeling guilty about it. How does that even happen? Like, genuinely, how do you make six figures and still feel like you're one unexpected expense away from a full meltdown? And look, I'm not a financial advisor or anything. I'm just a 28-year-old woman who spends way too much time thinking about money because I have to. But I figured this out recently, and it honestly made me feel a little bit better and a little bit worse at the same time. So let me explain. The thing nobody tells you about making more money is that it doesn't automatically make you feel rich. It just makes you feel like you should feel rich, which is somehow worse. Because now you're sitting there with this objectively good salary and you're still stressed about money. And you start thinking, maybe I'm just bad at this. Maybe everyone else who makes what I make is living in a beautiful apartment with savings and a vacation fund. And I'm the only one who's out here with $13,000 still left on an Amex from my glow-up era. But that's not actually what's happening. What's happening is something way more insidious, and it has a name. Lifestyle creep. Some people call it lifestyle inflation. I call it the trap that will quietly rob you while you're busy thinking you finally made it. Here's how it works. You get a raise. Let's say you were making $70,000 and now you're making $90,000. You're excited. You feel like you finally have breathing room. So you do what any rational person would do. You upgrade a little. You move into a nicer apartment because you can finally afford it. You start going to that bougie coffee shop instead of making it at home. You get your nails done every 2 weeks instead of every month. You buy the good wine at Trader Joe's, the $12 bottle instead of the $7 one. None of these things feel extravagant in the moment. They feel like you're finally living the life you've been working toward. But here's the problem. All of those little upgrades add up, and they add up fast. And before you know it, your new salary doesn't feel like more money. It feels like the same amount of stress with better lighting. I did this to myself, and I didn't even realize it until it was too late. When I moved to New York, I was making $85,000, and I was living with a roommate in Bed-Stuy, and I was fine. I was saving a little bit every month. I had my credit card under control. I felt like I had my life together. Then I got promoted, started making $95,000. Then a year later, I switched jobs and jumped to $120,000. And I was like, oh my God, I made it. I can finally live alone. So I got my own place in Crown Heights, $1,500 a month for a one-bedroom, which honestly isn't even that bad for New York, but it was $700 more than I was paying before. And then I started ordering delivery more because I was working late, and I was tired, and I deserved it. And then I started taking Ubers instead of the train sometimes because it was raining, or I was running late, or I just didn't feel like dealing with the subway. And then I started buying clothes that were a little nicer because I worked at a startup and I wanted to look the part. And none of it felt like a big deal. But when I actually sat down and added it up a few months ago, I realized I was spending almost $4,000 more per month than I was 2 years ago. $4,000. That's $48,000 a year. That's more than I was making at my first job out of college. And I couldn't even tell you where most of it went. The really messed up part is that this doesn't feel like overspending when it's happening. It feels like normal life. Because you're not buying crazy stuff. You're not getting bottle service every weekend or buying a Gucci bag. You're just living in a nicer place and eating better food and taking care of yourself in ways that feel reasonable. And that's what makes lifestyle creep so dangerous. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up like credit card debt where you can see the number and panic. It just quietly recalibrates your baseline so that the life you're living now costs exactly as much as you make, which means you're back to square one. You're just square one with a nicer apartment and an espresso machine. And here's the thing that really gets me. Once you upgrade, it's so hard to downgrade. Like, I know I could save more money if I moved back in with a roommate. I know that. But the idea of going backwards feels like failure. It feels like admitting I couldn't handle the life I built for myself. So instead, I just stay stressed about money and convince myself that I'll figure it out next month, which I never do. Because next month, I make the same amount, and I spend the same amount, and nothing changes. So what do you actually do about this? Because I'm not about to sit here and tell you to never enjoy your money. That's not realistic, and it's also not the point. The point is to be intentional about it. When you get a raise, before you do anything else, decide what percentage of that raise you're going to save or put toward debt. 20% is a good target, 30% if you can swing it. And then you can spend the rest guilt-free, because you already locked in the win. You already made sure that your future self benefits from this raise, not just your current self. And yeah, that means your lifestyle will still inflate a little bit, but it'll inflate in a controlled way, instead of in a way that swallows your entire paycheck. The other thing that helps is tracking your spending for like 2 months. I know that sounds boring, and I resisted it for so long because I didn't want to face it. But once I actually did it, I realized I was spending $300 a month on delivery. $300. I could have been putting that into my Roth IRA. I could have been paying down my Amex faster. Instead, I was spending it on mediocre pad thai that I didn't even finish. And listen, I still order delivery. I'm not about to pretend I meal prep every Sunday like some kind of finance influencer. But now I do it like twice a week instead of 5 times. And that alone saves me over $1,000 a year. I think the hardest part of all of this is accepting that making more money doesn't fix your money problems. It just gives you more room to make different mistakes. And if you don't actively protect yourself from lifestyle creep, it will take every single raise you ever get and turn it into nothing. You'll wake up one day making twice what you used to make and somehow still feeling broke. And that's not because you're bad with money. It's because nobody taught us how to handle this. Nobody told us that the real skill isn't making more. It's keeping more. And that requires saying no to yourself sometimes, even when you can technically afford it, which is honestly one of the hardest things to learn. I'm still figuring this out. I'm not perfect at it. But I'll say this. The month I started actually paying attention to where my money was going was the first month in 2 years that I ended with more in my account than I started with. And that felt better than any dinner or Uber or impulse buy ever did. So yeah, if you're making good money and still feeling broke, you're not alone. And you're not broken. You just got caught in the trap. But you can get out. You just have to decide that your future matters more than your right now. And then you have to prove it to yourself every single month until it becomes automatic.